The emergency room doors slammed open so hard they rattled the glass. A young trauma surgeon looked up from a blood-covered stretcher, locked eyes with a tired man holding a little girl's hand, and cried, "Thank God you're her husband." The exhausted stranger didn't answer. He simply looked at the terrified woman lying unconscious on the gurney, then at the frightened medical team waiting for someone, anyone, to make the next decision. For one impossible second, the entire emergency room froze. Then the single dad quietly nodded. "Do whatever you need to save her." No one knew that those few words would change 5 lives forever. 38-year-old Daniel Brooks had never expected his Tuesday evening to end inside Mercy General Hospital. He had only stopped to buy cereal after picking up his 8-year-old daughter Lily from her piano lesson. Rain had turned the streets into mirrors when another car skidded through a red light. Daniel barely avoided the collision. The silver SUV wasn't as lucky. It spun across 2 lanes before crashing into a light pole. Most drivers slowed down. Daniel stopped. Leaving Lily safely inside his truck with the doors locked, he sprinted through the pouring rain. The driver's door had jammed shut. Inside sat a woman in her early 30s, unconscious, her forehead bleeding. A little boy, maybe 6 years old, cried from the back seat. "My mommy won't wake up." Daniel managed to pull them both free just before smoke began curling from beneath the hood. By the time the ambulance arrived, the little boy refused to let go of Daniel's jacket. So the paramedics assumed they all belonged together. Daniel tried explaining during the ride. Nobody heard him over the sirens. Now, standing beneath harsh hospital lights, Daniel realized the misunderstanding had become much bigger. The injured woman was being rushed into emergency surgery. The little boy clung silently to Daniel's arm. Lily stood beside him, confused but calm. A nurse hurried over with paperwork. "We need consent immediately." Daniel finally spoke. "I'm not her husband." The nurse's face drained of color. Before panic spread, another surgeon interrupted. "The consent issue's already handled. State law allows emergency intervention because she's critical." Everyone exhaled. But the misunderstanding had already planted something unexpected. The little boy still wouldn't leave Daniel's side. Hours passed. Rain tapped softly against the hospital windows. Lily shared her crackers with the boy, whose name was Noah. Piece by piece, his fears softened. Daniel learned only fragments. His mother's name was Emma. They had recently moved. No grandparents nearby. No father in the picture. No emergency contacts memorized. Just silence. At midnight, a hospital administrator approached. "We've reached everyone listed." He hesitated. No one answered. Daniel looked toward the sleeping children. "So what happens if she wakes up alone?" The administrator didn't have an answer. Morning sunlight replaced the storm. Emma survived surgery, but she remained unconscious. A social worker gently explained that Noah would likely enter temporary protective care until relatives could be located. Daniel felt his stomach tighten. He had seen foster care up close. After losing his wife 4 years earlier, he'd volunteered delivering meals to children moving between temporary homes. Some found loving families. Many didn't. Lily quietly squeezed his hand. "Dad." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Daniel understood exactly what she was asking. The next surprise arrived before noon. Police investigators reviewed traffic camera footage. The accident hadn't been Emma's fault. A speeding delivery van had forced her into the intersection before fleeing. Suddenly, she wasn't just another patient. She was the victim in an active investigation. Without family nearby, detectives needed someone who had witnessed the crash and stayed afterward. Daniel became that person. Not because he had to, because leaving no longer felt possible. 3 days later, Emma finally opened her eyes. Everything felt unfamiliar. Machines beeped softly. Bandages wrapped her shoulder. Then she noticed Daniel sitting quietly in the corner, helping Noah finish a coloring book. Confusion crossed her face. The nurse smiled awkwardly. There was a misunderstanding. Emma listened as the entire unbelievable story unfolded. When she finally looked at Daniel, tears formed instantly. "You stayed?" Daniel shrugged. "You would have done the same." She wasn't sure she would have. Life had taught her not to expect strangers to remain after the crisis ended. Yet here he was, still there. Recovery wasn't simple. Emma had multiple fractures and months of rehabilitation ahead. She worried constantly about paying rent, missing work, and raising Noah alone. Daniel returned to repairing heating systems every morning before visiting the hospital every evening. Sometimes they barely spoke. Sometimes they shared vending machine coffee. Sometimes silence carried the conversation. Lily and Noah became friends far faster than the adults expected. Children often heal before grown-ups do. Then came another unexpected turn. Investigators identified the delivery driver. Everyone assumed he had intentionally fled. He hadn't. The elderly driver had suffered a diabetic blackout moments before the crash. When he regained consciousness miles away, he believed he'd struck only a traffic barrier. He broke down in tears after learning the truth. Emma surprised everyone. She refused to hate him. He made a terrible mistake, she whispered. So did life. Forgiveness wasn't easy, but carrying anger felt heavier than healing. Months passed. Physical therapy tested Emma every day. Daniel helped when he could, not because romance had magically appeared, because kindness had become routine. Neighbors noticed. Teachers noticed. Even hospital staff remembered the strange story of the man mistaken for a husband who never disappeared after telling the truth. One autumn afternoon, Mercy General invited former patients and first responders to a community appreciation event. Dr. Sarah Chun, the surgeon who had first mistaken Daniel for Emma's husband, recognized him immediately. She laughed before wiping away unexpected tears. I've replayed that night 100 times. Daniel smiled. So have I. She handed him a small framed photograph taken by hospital security. It showed him sitting in a waiting room chair. One sleeping child leaned against each shoulder. He hadn't even realized someone captured it. Below the picture was a simple inscription. Family isn't always the people you arrive with. Sometimes it's the people who refuse to leave. Daniel stared at it without speaking. Emma quietly slipped her hand over the frame. Not over his, just the frame. Some moments don't need grand gestures. Only shared understanding. Years later, Noah barely remembered the crash. He remembered something else instead. A soaked man running through rain. A little girl sharing crackers. Hospital chairs. Quiet patients. And one ordinary stranger who could have walked away 100 different times, but chose not to. Because sometimes the greatest act of love isn't claiming someone as family. It's treating them like family long before they ever become one. And perhaps that's the miracle people witnessed that unforgettable night. Not that an ER doctor mistook a single dad for a husband, but that compassion never bothered correcting the misunderstanding until everyone was finally safe. In a world where people often ask, who does this belong to? Daniel answered a far better question instead. Who needs me right now? Sometimes, that's all it takes to save a life far beyond the operating room.